cursor blinked, a relentless metronome counting down the final hours of a brutal deadline. Alina's world had shrunk to the glow of her monitor and the frantic click of her mouse. As she reached to adjust the color palette for the umpteenth time, a sliver of light from her desk lamp caught her hand. She paused. There, running from the pale half-moons to the tips of her fingernails, were faint vertical ridges, like tiny, parallel rivers etched into a smooth plain. She hadn't noticed them before. She flexed her fingers, studying the subtle imperfections. They weren't painful or discolored, just there, tiny fault lines in her otherwise unremarkable nails. A normal sign of aging, probably. Everyone got them. But the thought felt hollow, a reflexive dismissal. A memory surfaced, unbidden, her grandmother holding Alina's small hand in her own wrinkled one, tracing a child's smooth nail. The body writes its stories here, Mija. You just have to learn to read the words. Alina had always thought it was just an old saying, a bit of folk wisdom. Now, in the silent, stressed solitude of her studio, the ridges seemed less like random texture and more like deliberate script. A quiet, persistent curiosity uncoiled within her, cutting through the fog of fatigue. What story, however small, were these tiny lines beginning to tell? It was just a glance, a fleeting observation wrested from a hectic moment, but it was a hook. It latched deep, turning a simple glance into the first step of an examination she hadn't known she needed to begin. The project on her screen was forgotten for a full minute as she stared at her hands, seeing them not as tools, but as maps. Alina's curiosity, once sparked, became a quiet flame. In the days following her deadline, she found her eyes drifting to her hands with new intent. The vertical ridges were just the beginning. She learned during late-night research sessions that replaced her usual scrolling. Medical journals and dermatology sites spoke of 7 key signs, a lexicon written in keratin. She began her own forensic examination, holding her hands under the bright kitchen light. Her nails were brittle, prone to splitting at the edges. She connected this immediately to the small bottle of hand sanitizer perpetually on her desk, its alcohol content a relentless, drying assault. But the articles suggested deeper possibilities, nutritional gaps. Iron deficiency often announced itself this way, with thin, fragile plates. She thought of her diet, the skipped meals during crunch times, and made a mental note. Then she spotted them, 2 tiny, cloud-like white spots on her left thumbnail, leukonychia. The term was clinical, but the cause was mundanely physical. She remembered, with a faint smile, slamming that same thumb in a car door months ago. The nail had recorded the minor trauma, a harmless fossil of a forgotten moment. This was the revelation that truly captivated her. Nails grew slowly, about 3 millimeters. What appeared at the free edge today was a message sent from the matrix under the cuticle weeks or even months prior. They were not a live feed of health, but a delayed mirror, a historical record scrolling slowly into view. Her body was a diligent archivist, inscribing a subtle, ongoing biography in layers of hardened protein. Each ridge, spot, and variation was a clue left behind by the past state of her body, a silent testament to illnesses weathered, nutrients metabolized, and injuries sustained. The concept filled her with a strange awe. She was walking around with a pale, slow-motion film of her recent life encoded at her fingertips. She read on, scrolling past images of pitting and ridges until she reached a description of koilonychia, spoon nails. The text described nails that were abnormally thin and curved inward, forming a shallow dip that could hold a droplet of water. They were often pale, almost white. A common association, iron deficiency anemia. As she read the description, cold, intuitive chill traced her spine. She slowly turned her own hands, examining the natural curve of her nail plates. They weren't spoon-shaped, not yet, but they were undeniably, uniformly pale, the healthy pink blush noticeably faint. The chill settled into a solid, recognizable weight in her stomach. The mirror was showing her something she had not consciously seen. The chill of recognition from the spoon nails lingered, but Alina pressed on, determined to view the full picture. The next sign, clubbing, presented a stark visual contrast. She studied images of fingers where the nails curved dramatically downward, the fingertips swollen like tiny drumsticks. The mechanism fascinated her. Chronic low oxygen in the blood could cause soft tissue expansion at the fingertips, pushing the nail bed into that distinctive angle. It was the body's silent, structural plea for air. Her mind immediately flew to her Aunt Rosa, whose lifelong struggle with COPD had, in its later stages, subtly altered her hands. Alina remembered holding those warm, swollen fingers, the nails like polished shells atop rounded flesh. The connection was visceral, transforming a clinical term into a breathless reality she had touched. She contrasted this with the next clue, yellow nail syndrome. While sometimes linked to serious respiratory conditions, the articles emphasized far more common culprits. The vibrant stains could be a simple chronicle of habits, the residue of dark nail polish left on too long, or the tannins from a daily ritual of black tea. It could even signal a fungal guest, a persistent but typically harmless invader. The lesson was clear. Not every unusual hue was a siren. Context was the essential decoder. Then she discovered Beau's lines, and the concept of nails as a personal timeline crystallized. These were horizontal grooves, deep dents that ran across the nail plate, formed when the nail matrix temporarily halted its production due to significant systemic stress. It was a pause button pressed by the body, a scar in time. Alina brought her own index finger close to her eye, searching. There, almost imperceptible, was a faint, horizontal ridge about a third of the way down the nail. She traced its shallow path with her thumb. The timing was perfect. Months ago, a severe flu had laid her low for over a week, a period of high fever and profound exhaustion. Her body had been fighting for its life, and here was the receipt slowly growing out. That faint line was a geological stratum marking a past event, a tiny monument to a battle won. This was the ultimate emphasis of her research, pattern recognition over panic. A single oddity was often meaningless noise, but a constellation of signs, read together with personal history, could whisper a coherent story. Her pale nails might suggest a conversation about iron, but they existed alongside the brittle texture from sanitizer and the Beau's line from the flu. They were parts of a whole narrative, not isolated. Emergencies. The ridges, the spots, the lines, they were not omens but notes. Her task was not to dread them, but to understand their grammar, to see her hands as a slowly updating scroll of her physical past, where context turned clues into comprehension, not fear. Synthesis arrived not as a thunderclap, but as a quiet settling. Alina closed her laptop, the glow fading from her tired eyes. The 7 clues were no longer isolated mysteries, but interconnected facets of a single truth. Her nails were not alarm bells. They were a quiet, ongoing report. Age and the natural wear of systems made them more communicative, their texture a ledger of time and internal weather. Yet the overwhelming message of her research was one of benignity. Most signs were simply the body's way of noting a passing event, a minor trauma, a seasonal illness, a nutritional ebb. She decided then on a new philosophy, to monitor, not to panic. This was the core message, the balance between awareness and alarm. Her body was speaking in its slow, keratinous language, and she had finally begun to learn its alphabet. The pale beds and vertical ridges were not calls for frantic action, but gentle suggestions to consider her diet, to manage her stress, to view self-care as a sustained practice rather than a crisis response. Later, under the soft light of her bedside lamp, she held her hands before her. She saw the faint ridges, the remembered white spots, the subtle pale hue. But she saw them now not with a clinician's worry, but with a historian's respect. They were windows into her body's silent, diligent work, and a mirror reflecting months of her life. She felt a profound connection to a larger, ancient story of observation and health, a participant in the slow, careful reading of one's own physical narrative. The stories were there, written in the delicate curves of her nails, waiting patiently to be understood.